Shireen and Symbios, I really do appreciate the opportunity to share with you, and really thanks for your kind words. I'm just a little bit of background about myself. I'm a chemical engineer. For many years, I've been plant manager in a number of countries around the world. And maybe it's easier to talk about continents than countries, but in Australia, New Zealand, Asia, the Middle East, England, Central America. So I've been around the world a bit and dragged my family around the world, but they've enjoyed it. And in the last 15 years, I've really devoted my time to implementing lean in a number of global organisations, which I've really had the pleasure to do, and from a zero start. So I'm really passionate about making people part of the solution. And I've got something that I'd like to share today, which is really practical. I want to thank Pascal, and sorry, Pascal, I'm just going to plug the book once more. But thank you, Pascal, for setting this platform up for me to share with you guys today. It's a real honour for me, as I said. This is one of my most favourite topics, and hopefully by the end of my sharing my experience, you'll come away with some really great tips to help you in your organisation. So the title of my chat today is How to Engage Your Frontline Staff in Using Data for Daily Management Meetings. And I've been working in this space for quite a number of years, and I truly believe if you apply what I'm going to share, this will make a huge difference to your organisation and those organisations who you service. Now, the connection between data and daily management is never an easy topic to cover, but over the years, I've learned some really great techniques to get the most out of this lean methodology. And as an outcome, I'm really hoping that you'll have a better understanding of how to make the use of data and make it more engaging for your frontline teams in the transformation of your organisation. You know, most of the things I'll share with you today are from my own application, and I've really seen a great deal of improvement over the organisations that I've worked with as I've walked the journey. So if you're starting or already on the implementation journey, please be courageous. Push through the challenges, and I'm absolutely confident that you'll see a transformation through these simple steps that I'm going to share with you today. Oh, and by the way, just in case everyone's asking, in the Australian cities, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but there really are no kangaroos down the main streets, okay? If people are telling you that, it's really not true, okay? So just to remind you of that. So I'm going to cover a few topics today around daily management levels, T1 and T2. What I'll do is I'll talk about the tier meeting approach, explain the boards and the meeting routines, then the fundamentals that determine the data, including leading and lagging indicators. And then I'd like to share with you a couple of really powerful concepts, contributor analysis and the power of the pen. I'll quickly cover driving actions, and then I'll finish off with some keys on making these meetings successful, which I call my 7 habits of highly effective meetings. Now, you've probably seen this guy before. Deming was really wise in telling us that the management of processes and systems really relies on measurement. But I'd like to add the key being the right use of the data in the right forum. And I found in countries around the world that I've worked that organisations spend a lot of effort on the framework, a lot of effort on the data, but unfortunately focus less on the engagement. Now, that's a generalisation, but it depends on the organisation. Some organisations have a good handle on it. Some organisations find it challenging. Now, it could be a factor of the maturity of the data system, the organisation's culture, or the people. But one key message I'd like to share is that we need to start somewhere. And Voltaire, the famous writer, once said, "Perfect is the enemy of good." So one of my key messages is don't let perfect get in the way of being good. I'm sure you've all heard of daily management meetings. It's not new. And in the lean space, It's very, very popular. Really, they're just an opportunity for teams to come together and review key indicators and metrics, which will then bring about improvement. Now, it's a daily team forum, which has so many benefits, not only reviewing key metrics, but bringing the team together to work together and to improve together. Fantastic tool for engaging your staff, for assigning accountability and empowering your staff to go further than you expect. Now, who doesn't want that as an outcome? Empowering your staff to go further than you expected. Now, when I was a plant manager over the number of years, if I knew what I know now, it would have saved me so much pain and heartache and trying to achieve the results. So I've been saying for some years, and I'm going to be bold in saying this, I've been saying the same thing for a number of years. If you only do one thing, if you only focus on this one thing in your lean journey, this will provide you with the greatest return for your effort. It will dramatically transform your business. Why? Because I've seen it myself. I've seen it in a number of organizations, and I'm in contact with people around the world who attest to the same thing. But then again, I'm sure many of you who are joining me today have really the same opinion, that this is going to revolutionize your business. Now, I'm talking about the terminology of tiered meetings, T1, T2, T3. Now, T1 is the most fundamental, which is the supervisor or the manager and their immediate team. The level T2 is middle management, which is really the group of supervisors or middle managers and their senior manager. And this is typically a collection of people with moderate to good skills. And typically, they're the most passionate and they have the greatest need for solutions and answers to their problems. Middle managers are crying out for this type of tool. And then finally, the senior management is the helicopter's view. I'm not really going to cover that today. I'm really going to stay with the T1 and T2. So let's quickly look at the fundamental board. The most fundamental board is a T1 board. It should be at the Gemba where the team can see it frequently. And an ideal position is where they work or where they walk past regularly. It's a focal point. It reminds them of the current state. Now, it must be owned by the local team because it's their board and it's going to be used to drive improvement. So they need to own it. And I've found frontline staff love to know how their team is performing. They love to know if what they're doing is making a difference. And I think the T1 board will give them this information. It instantly shows the health of the organization. And I always encourage organizations to make the boards as standard as possible across their site. Standardization is absolutely great in aiding engagement. Now, in this example, there are 18 boards across the site, all the same design, but within the board specific displayed metrics related to the function of that particular department. So from a distance, they all look the same. So if one staff moves from one department to another, they're already familiar with the T1 board. So by far the most important purpose of the T1 board is to drive engagement, to get people involved rather than being observers. Otherwise, the responsibility of improvement falls to the supervisor. So let's take a quick look at the T1 review meeting. And as you can see in this example, the meeting is held around the board with the whole team, facilitated by the local supervisor. In this case, it's a service industry, or by the local manager. Building engagement is its primary purpose. And the agenda of the meeting is simply flowing from left to right with simple and easy to follow information written onto the board by the area leader or the supervisor. And the meeting is short, sharp, and to the point, ideally at the start of the day or at the start of the shift, and only needs to run for 5 to 8 minutes. And I believe maximum engagement comes from standing up and having the meeting around the board. That's why they're called daily stand-up meetings. Now, if we're building engagement, which we are, consider sharing the responsibilities. Take turns to update the board. Take turns in capturing actions. This will really empower your staff. Now, the T2 board is a little more involved, but not overly complex. Since it's owned by the supervisors, it needs to be more structured. There are more players interacting with the board, So we need to be a bit more disciplined in the process. But once again, it's a focal point. Using visual displays will quickly tell us the current health of the department or the overall organisation. Sorry about the kangaroos. Now, since we're engaging sometimes a large group, it will be necessary to control the flow using tools such as an agenda and time commitment. Now, this means having a structured approach, and an agenda works really well here. Now, as the team learns the process, then the agenda becomes a reference point, maybe in case new people turn up. And a time commitment is very important. And I found a great tool is a color-coded clock, which is really simply a clock where I've colored the plastic face red or green according to the length of the meeting. And it's prominently positioned to ensure we start on time and finish on time, ensuring every participant works towards the aim of that time commitment. And this will keep our promise to each other and our promise of expecting keeping it on time. Now, if you recall, the T2 is held with a group of supervisors and their senior manager. Now, because of the participants, this might be the best meeting to start with. Remember, I said that these are typically the most passionate and crying out for this kind of tool. So most of my implementations over the years have started with the T2, not the T3 or 1, but started with the T2. Now, as you can see in this example, the meeting is also held by standing up around the board, facilitated by a senior manager, or if the team is mature enough, facilitated by the team themselves. Now, I would initially coach the meeting and then hand that over to the local leader to take up continued coaching. Now, the meeting is attended by all those people who manage the T1 meetings, so they can share their results from the individual teams to the others gathered. So ideally, the T2 meeting should operate prior to the T1s so that information can be escalated up and cascaded down to the front line. So now I've laid the platform, let's talk about the data for these meetings. And I'm sure that's what everyone is interested in. So I've laid the platform, we're going to talk about the data. Now, the data to be selected for the T1 and T2 meetings must come from a cascade from the organisation's key objectives. I believe a strong and clearly identifiable cascade will make engagement so much easier. Now, we can use tools such as Hoshin Canary, master planning, strategy deployment, and I've done this many times over a few organisations, but whichever way you choose to cascade the objectives, they must be linked so you can see that there's a strong and clearly identifiable cascade. Oh, and while we're here, in this example, the strategic plan is adjacent to the T2 board, as you can see on the left-hand side. This can help in the team seeing the link between what their overall organisation wants to do and how we contribute to these goals. Now, if the cascade is correct, then everything accomplished by the T1 and the T2 has a direct contribution to the organisation's overarching key objectives. Do organisations always get this right from the start? Sometimes not. But we need to plan well and be open-minded enough to make improvements as we go. Now, the data must be easy to access with minimal effort. If it's too hard to obtain the data or requires too much manipulation, it won't be effective. And integrity of the data is critical. This means the data is free from bias, inaccuracy, or error. And I believe the best data is easy, accessible, simple data. Now, this is a fundamentally important principle as our efforts will be directed by the data. So if the data has integrity, then the direction that the data will lead us into is the right direction. And we need a combination of leading and lagging indicators. And understanding the difference between lead and lag is important to help us select the right data. Chris McChesney and Sean Covey illustrate in their book, The 4 Disciplines of Execution, the difference between these two types of measures. Now, these are the guys who brought us the 7 habits of highly effective people. For example, you can't control the number of times your car breaks down on the side of the road, which is a lagging measure, but you can control how often your vehicle receives routine maintenance, which is a leading measure. And like the name applies, a lag measure has already happened, whilst the lead measure is more proactive. And by the way, in this particular book, there are 4 disciplines of execution. 1, focus on the few. Don't try and fix everything. 2, select the right measures, both lagging and leading. 3, create a scorecard and measures board so everyone can see what we're focused on. And 4, review using frequent team meetings focused on the few goals. Does that sound exactly what we're trying to do? And this particular book has been great, or this methodology has been great, and has made a real difference across a lot of different organisations over the last few years. So lag measures are typically overall organisation objectives, or those that are first cascaded down. Lag metrics are typically easy to understand, but unfortunately focusing on them won't give you the acceleration towards the target you need because they're lagging. Now, on the other hand, now lead metrics are the drivers that affect the end result. But sometimes, unfortunately, they tend to be more abstract. So it might be hard to see the contribution to the target. And sometimes we find it easier to gravitate towards lagging metrics. But I think we need a combination of both. In this example, the top line metrics have a direct correlation to the organisation's objectives, or in fact, actually might be the same. For example, number of injuries recorded, total sales achieved, total inventory measured. And the subsequent metrics should be the leading metrics, which are the contributors to those top line. So having a combination of the two allows us to drive effort into our leading measure and therefore see a shift in our lagging. Like in the car example, putting energy into car maintenance should see an improvement into the breakdown frequency. So let's take a look at the data for the T2. Now, I'm using whiteboard examples, but the same principle applies with digital boards. I'm certainly not against digital boards and digitalizing the meetings. It definitely has its place, but it depends on the maturity. I'm a big believer, let's start simple, and then we can progress to a mature state, because sustainability and engagement is very important. Like these examples show, the first is safety. Now, organisations typically lead with safety as a key priority. A lot of organisations, particularly manufacturing organisations, typically lead with safety as a key priority. So deploying it first in a T2 shows everyone that we care about people by ensuring safety is the first thing we do, not just in word, but in actions as well. Now, the remaining data must meet these criteria. Obviously, there must be important metrics. They must contribute to the overarching organisational objectives. The team must have control of the metric, and it must be able to drive a result. We prioritise the flow of the data into streams to make it a logical progression. And then, in this case, the streams are vertical, and the subsequent rows are additional metrics to check. But this is where we can start to provide some leading metrics or analysis. They must be simple indicators, not confusing or complex. And with a daily meeting, there must be daily metrics with trends over a long period, such as monthly. And the beauty of this is trends will allow us to follow a progression. And as we implement improvements, the trend charts will encourage us on a journey. And like I said before, there must be a combination of lagging and leading indicators. For example, if we're measuring, in this case, these two photos, if we're measuring delivery performance, then a key indicator might be DIFOT, delivered in full on time. But this is a lagging indicator. So we need to have subsequent leading indicators to enable improvement, because real improvement comes from focusing on these leading metrics, which will then contribute to changing the lagging metric. And the data should immediately communicate a message. Like all good visual indicators, within a few seconds, the message must be understood. So avoid complicated or crowded charts as your leading focus points, because the more complicated the chart will be, the slower the message will be transmitted and the slower it will be received. Allow the data to do the talking. Start with a simple chart and allow the data to drive you towards the right destination. And a must is coloured indicators. Green meaning on target and red meaning not on target. Now, I'd like to share with you a very simple tool called a contributor analysis. And I'm sure you've heard of this before. This is a very simple technique that you can use when cascading metrics. Simply put, it's a brainstorming exercise to map the metrics to the overarching objectives, aligned with what's in the team's control and to the available data. And really, it's a great tool for building the T2. In the case of T2, there's different configurations and layouts, but above all, the information must flow. Now, in this example, the top line is a list of departments or areas running horizontally. And then the first row starts with lagging metrics. For example, we talked about for safety. Then the subsequent rows are additional metrics, ideally leading and are added during a brainstorm exercise by the team. And as this example shows, we're using post-it notes. Now, remember the criteria that I mentioned before. Matching those criteria allows us then to brainstorm possible leading metrics that are contributors to the higher levels. In this example, whereby the whole site shares the same metrics, the departments are measuring the same metrics. They're not divided into areas, they're divided into streams or metric categories. Once again, the top line starts with the lagging metric. Then the subsequent leading metrics are added during the brainstorm exercise with the entire T2 team, using the metric selection criteria that I mentioned before. Now, the good thing about this is the contributor analysis tool can be used to start the alignment or build a T2 like I suggested, and then deployed again to check alignment when metrics change or when new metrics are added. I want to talk about the power of the pen. This is a really powerful engagement tool. So one of the most effective techniques to engage frontline staff is within this psychological principle called the power of the pen. Now, it's been proven neurologically that there's a connection between the writing, the understanding, the recalling, and the ownership. Now, you can Google power of the pen. The principle is very sound. So by having team members annotate the board and color in the charts by hand builds ownership and engagement in the metric. Coloring charts, we should limit to using red or green. Now, I'm not against printing colored charts, but once again, it's all about the level of maturity. It really is all about starting small and building as you go. Now, because we're looking for engagement and improvement, not necessarily neatness. And one additional growing concept in the lean field is red is not a bad thing, but an opportunity for improvement. And this has provided coaches with the opportunity through positive reinforcement for a paradigm shift that red is not bad, but really is an opportunity. Sorry again for the kangaroos. Please ensure the scale of the chart is appropriate to the communicating the message, and include a target line to show where we need to be. Then as we flow down, we use subsequent charts that reveal our line of investigation improvement. And these are more leading metrics, maybe such as a Pareto. As secondary measures, a Pareto chart can indicate what direction we should be taking, but don't lead with this chart and only use it to provide a direction for us to explore. The same thing applies with pie charts and other visual diagrams, but above all, make them simple and easy to understand. Now, I'm going to quickly mention building the T1. Now, recall the T1 is the local supervisor or local manager and their team. The T1 is a cascade of the T2, making them clear enough for the frontline team to understand. You could say that the T1 metrics are a subset of the T2 within the control of the team, so they're going to be more fundamental and more simple, staying within the control of the team, but based on the available data. Now, I believe what could work here is simple indicators like dot charts. And I've used this many times with success, simply displaying, did we achieve what we said we would? Green, yes. Red, no. Maybe we could show the answer to a simple compliance question. Did we do what we said we do? Remember, this is the T1. Very simple indicators. Now, we could even use a tick. Did we meet the target? Tick yes, cross no, as long as the target has been specified. For example, if the T2 measure is DIFOT, delivered in full on time, then the T1 measure must be within the team's control and a contributor to DIFOT. For example, one contributor might be the team's ability to meet the production plan. Now, in this case, shown here under the customer heading. So why has this team used customer as a heading? Since it's easy for the team to understand, if we complete what we said we would on time, then the internal customer has a better chance for success. Hence, it's a contributor to DIFOT and a leading metric. Now, this shows the importance of choosing the T1 metric that will directly contribute to the T2 level. And when building the T1, there is less collaboration, primarily due to the audience or the participants. But as we mature and the team understands the process, then we can be more collaborative. So now we've selected the measures and created our T2 and T1 meetings. We must drive improvements. This is where we can really build engagement further by driving improvements from the meeting and the board. Now in the T1, the supervisor or the manager controls the flow. In the T2, the senior manager or the delegate or the team self-controls the flow. But during both types of meetings, and this is very important, I've found over the years, during both types of meetings, we capture actions by driving the discussion to a point of conclusion, such as an action, placing this on the action board. Even if it's healthy discussion, for the sake of keeping the meeting to the time commitment, we need to decide taking the discussion to action or deferring it to after the meeting. Because sometimes the debate won't involve everyone. So why do we tie up everyone in the meeting? During the course of the data presentation, actions are agreed and recorded on the board. If in the presentation of the data, the owner of the presentation of this data has already proactively created an action plan, this needs to be displayed on the measures board, either as containment or countermeasure with that metric, so we can see what's happening. And with these countermeasures, regular progress updates on the activity must be provided to keep everyone informed. So finally, in wrapping up, I said at the start, if you only do one thing in your lean journey, this is the best tool to deploy. To get the best outcome, I've learned over the years some really great keys, and you could call these my 7 habits of highly effective meetings. Now, we need to create a safe environment where team members feel they can be safe. So start with being respectful, particularly in the way questions are asked and answered. Leaders must be coaching each other to ensure this happens. Leaders must also model this behaviour. A safe environment ensures that our staff are set up for success. Now, using general meeting rules also will make a significant difference. And as mentioned before, having a colour-coded clock to indicate our time commitment is a powerful tool to ensure we deliver on time our promise. And having the team undertake the meeting by standing up, this will also help facilitate your time commitment. The presenter comes to the board and presents the data. Include an action board to capture the actions raised during the meeting, and this will help to see how engagement grows. And critically important that as leaders, we need to ensure it is a safe environment. This is where the team members can support each other. I like to think of it as the presenter owns the data, but the whole team is responsible for fixing it. And a safe environment will provide that engagement. Now, if you want to pick up some further information, I have a YouTube channel totally devoted to continuous improvement with quite a number of short videos that I've showcased with these methods, and some of them that I've shared today. Now, the latest series are called Lean Bites, which are 2-minute videos to help communicate simple lean topics. A great training tool, education tool for your staff. And please subscribe. Click on the QR code and subscribe so you don't miss out on the latest content. Now, you'll also find me on LinkedIn. I really would love if you followed me on LinkedIn or even connected with me on LinkedIn. There's a QR code there. And if you need any support or if there's anything I can help you with, I'm happy to help, because I do get a lot of questions on LinkedIn, and I'm always happy to assist with questions via LinkedIn. So I really want to thank you for listening to what I've shared today. I hope these simple steps and methods will go a long way to engaging your frontline staff in the use of valuable data that will drive your business forward and to transforming to a whole new level. And I really do thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Thank you very much.
So do you have any questions, Shireen?
Yes. One question: how do you fight attrition when the daily management board get too repetitive? It's like attrition when you do it a day and day and day, and people after some time, it seems they get bored because you keep repeating the same thing.
Well, one of the things that I've found that there's going to be a level of repetitiveness because it is a process, right? But we're also talking about different things that are happening each day and reviewing data that's not going to be the same each day. If we are reviewing data, for example, and it's always on target, we need to either change the metric or we need to change the target. So there's always opportunity to grow. And I think if we find the meeting to get stale, typically I haven't encountered a lot of meetings that get stale or get stagnant because they're normally short, sharp meetings. The only thing that I've really noticed over the years of doing this is when meetings become too quick. And if meetings become too quick, we might end up missing things.
Okay. So some people write for you, your presentation is really good. So they like your presentation here. Okay, they write you, thank you, your presentation was excellent. So they say, please share again the YouTube channel. So can we go back to the QR codes?
Yeah, we can certainly go back to the QR codes.
Yeah.
So just while people are looking at the QR codes, on the YouTube channel, you can look up my name because it's the name of the YouTube channel. All those videos are they're all animated videos, all about very simple, lean topics. And I found that it's good to use a number of different things to communicate in a training sense to your staff. And one of the things is, maybe some animated videos as well.
Okay. So another question for you, the T3 charts, where do you put the physical location of these boards? T3, is it in the factory?
Well, if we're talking about a manufacturing environment, I have seen this done, and I've done it myself really well, to put it in the factory. Because you know what? We're really talking about harnessing the people like if you're talking about manufacturing, harnessing people in the business. And I've got this old saying, and I've been using it for 20 years. What is the easiest way to change the course of the Queen Mary? So Queen Mary, up until a few years ago, was a big ship. What's the easiest way to change the course of the Queen Mary? Is with 1,000 dolphins. So what we've got to try and do, and that's what I'm passionate about, is engaging people in the solution. So having a T3, typically T3 meetings would be sitting in the boardroom electronic, which is fine. But how much more valuable would that be of creating a board in a central part in the factory, if it's a manufacturing operation, and having the stand up by the senior leaders at that board. Because what happens, of course, Shireen, and I'm sure you've seen it in your work, that by showing that in amongst the factory, the senior leaders have got to be transparent. It's because people can see it. And how powerful would that be? A T3 board, and I've implemented a T3 board where the people come into the plant. So they come into the plant, they swipe their card to clock on. There's the T3 board right in front of them. Once a week, the senior leaders stand a huddle at that board.
So, Paul, there is another
Yes.
question. I think it's asking you, what resources or books do you recommend for learning about daily management?
Daily management. There's a few good books. I don't actually have them with me to show you what they look like, but there's a really good one, Learning to Lead, with Kate Anderson. That's a really good book. Actually, there's a lot of really good content in North America with the Gemba Academy. So that's Kevin Meyer and the Gemba Academy. There's really a lot of good resources, good practical video resources too.
Okay.